Hi everyone, Krista Cowan here with another episode of The Barefoot Genealogist. Today's topic is crafting a genealogy research plan. Now, that may seem a little bit daunting to some of you who are new to family history and get so excited about just building your family tree as quickly as possible. But a lot of times when we're doing genealogy, we hit what we call brick walls. Now, a lot of times those brick walls are really just made out of paper, but we don't have the skills or the know-how to break through them, and so they seem kind of insurmountable. So what we're going to talk about today is just simply a tool that you can use to help break through those walls, to help discover the things that you want to discover. Every 10 days or so, I do a tweet chat over on Twitter. I also monitor the Ask at Ancestry.com email box, where lots of people, dozens and dozens of people every day send in questions about their research challenges. And as I read through those, one of the things that I've discovered is that this basic process is missing. And so what I'm going to share today is just maybe not even so much about research as it is about just changing the way that we think or looking at our problems from a little bit of a different perspective. Let me give you one example. And this is not uncommon. I get this question all the time, and I hope people don't think I'm making fun. Really, I just want to use it to illustrate a point. One of the questions that I get a lot is, for example, I know nothing about my great-grandfather. How do I find out who he is? Now, if you've ever spent any time with me on chat or on Twitter, you know that I very rarely will just start answering those questions. Almost always, what I do is ask questions back. Okay? Because saying you know nothing about an individual really isn't true. Okay? If you're looking, for example, for your grandmother's grandfather, when you say you know nothing about him, usually what you mean is you don't know his name or where he was born or when he died. Right? You know nothing about his life, what you would fill into the boxes on his information on the pedigree chart. But you do know some things about him. For example, you know who he's the father of, right? Because you're looking not for your great-great-grandfather. What you're looking for is the father of your great-grandfather. I hope that makes sense. Let me just say that one more time and make sure you get that, right? You're not really looking for your great-great-grandfather who you know nothing about. What you're looking for is the father of your great-grandfather. And you do know some things about him. Hopefully you've already figured out where he was born and when. So you know that possibly your great-great-grandfather lived in that place in that time period. Maybe you even know who his mother is. So you know that this man had a relationship with this woman at some point in time. You also have an idea of about how old he is, right? And maybe you don't have it narrowed down to a specific year or even a specific decade, but you at least have it narrowed down to a century, right? You know that this man, if your great-grandfather was born in Pennsylvania in 1875, chances are his father was not born in England in 1775, right? So you have some kind of general idea about this person. So changing the way that you look at those questions or ask those questions starts to change the way we approach some of those research problems. And I'm just going to share with you today one of the ways that I do that. This is not the definitive way to do this. There are lots of different approaches that we can take when coming to our research. As a matter of fact, when I try this approach, and sometimes it doesn't work for me, sometimes I'll take a different approach to the same problem. But this is just to get your mind turning, and again, to help you look at things a little bit different way. And maybe if you try it out on a few problems, you'll discover that some of the questions that I'm going to ask really will help move your research along a little bit further. So with that said, let's dive into the PowerPoint presentation. Lots of slides today, not a lot of time, and not a lot directly online. So here is just some examples. The first thing you want to do when you're crafting a research plan is have a focus. I've discovered that it's really easy to be all over the place when we're doing our research. And so have a focus. One of the things I have discovered that helps me is to have a broad focus, and then I'll have several specific focuses or specific goals underneath that. And that broad focus, I actually on occasion will post it somewhere so that I don't get distracted. Right now I'm working on this project to identify all of the descendants of my third great-grandfather, David Heaps. So I know lots about him, and I know lots about the line that I descend from, but I don't know a lot about his other children and their descendants. And so I want to learn more about them. And so I've actually written this down on a little index card, and I've tacked it to my wall so that when I sit down on that rare occasion and I actually get to work on my own genealogy, I know what it is that I'm supposed to be working on, so I don't get distracted by shaky leaves and new hints and fun new databases. Now, it still happens on occasion, but this is one of the ways that I keep focused, is that I have a broad goal that I'm working on in my family history, and then I have specific goals. So Albert Carrington Heaps is one of the children of David Heaps, and the specific goal might be, right now I need to discover who is the wife of Albert Carrington Heaps. And maybe the next goal will be, okay, who are the children of Albert and his wife? And then maybe the next goal will be, okay, who is the wife of Albert's oldest son? And you just work your way one goal at a time. Let me just share with you a couple of others so you get the idea about how this works, right? Maybe your broad goal is, I want to trace 3 generations of ancestors for my maternal grandmother. Okay. Now you'll notice I'm not saying I want to trace my family tree. I get emails like that all the time. I want to trace my family tree. How do I do it? Or can you do it? And that's a little too broad. So be specific. It's not also I want to trace all the ancestors of my maternal grandmother. It's I want to just trace 3 generations, which with her, counting her, would be a 4-generation chart if she was the person in place number 1. And then the specific goal then becomes, who are the parents of Albert Jefferson Kerr, right? So in this case, my maternal grandmother's father, I want to identify his parents. So I know who he is, who are his parents. That's the specific goal for the time. Okay, one more. A lot of us we're lucky enough to inherit family history from other family members. And so other people have done this work before us. Unfortunately, in that inheritance process, we've discovered that not a lot of what they gave us was documented. And so maybe your broad goal rather, is to document your family history, right? Rather than trying to take it back further, you want to make sure that what you have is accurate. You also want to learn more about these people in the process, and that documentation helps tell those stories. And so maybe the specific goal for the time being is to locate all available census records for all 4 of your grandparents and all 8 of your great-grandparents. That's a very specific goal based in very specific records and for a set number of people, right? Again, it's not every census record in the world, and it's not every census record for your whole tree, and it's not all records for all these people, right? So try to create something that's specific and that feels doable to you, that's not so overwhelming that you get lost or bored or whatever, right? That's how I approach it, or that's how I set my specific goals. Now, here are the 2 questions that I always ask both myself and those who come to me with research questions. Okay, so when the person chats to me and says, I don't know anything about my great-grandfather's father, really they know something, remember? What they're looking for is the father, and so they know that he had a child, and they know that this is the child's name. So what do you know? And then the next question is, what do you want to know? So a lot of times people will come to me and they'll just say, I don't know anything about this person, and or I need to find this person, and that's not really the right language to help you, right? This is just about you asking yourself questions. The right questions to ask are, what do you want to know specifically? Are you looking for the parents? Are you looking for a specific record? Are you looking for his military service? Are you looking for, what is it that you're looking for? So think about that, because that will help you. Now, here are kind of the sub-questions that I ask. I'm not just going to ask what you know. I want to know how you know that, because how you know that makes a difference. Now, let's just talk about this for just a minute, right? One of the challenges that I have when people come to me and they say, I want to know who my great-grandmother's Indian mother was. Okay, that's great. You've asked a question, it's very specific. What do you already know? Well, I know about my great-grandmother, okay? What do you know about her mother? Well, I know she was an Indian. Okay, well, how do you know that? Well, because my grandmother told me. Okay. How else might you know that? Well, because I have a picture of her and she looks like she's Native American. Well, start to sort through how you know some of the things you know. And what you'll discover is that a lot of times it's just family stories. Not that those stories are not true, but maybe they're not entirely true. Maybe there are pieces of the truth, kind of like the game of telephone, where things get passed down and they get altered just a little bit each time. And so set those stories there. I mean, make sure that they're documented, but recognize that those are family stories. And then search for the actual records to document that. Now, if you know she's Native American because you found her on a census record and it lists that, and maybe you also found her in the Dawes rolls and it lists that, right? That's a little bit different than I have a picture and she looks Native American. Again, I'm not trying to make light of or fun of anybody for the way that they approach this. I'm just trying to help you understand that sometimes you have to look at things in a little bit different way. So what you know already is important, but how you know it is at least as important as that. Okay? Then the next part is, what do you want to know? And now here's where I have the most fun. And this is where, when people chat me questions, I can provide the most help. Where could you find this information? Make a list. Make a list of all of the places that you know where you could possibly get the information that you're looking for. And then maybe ask other people or share that. One of the great things about family history is that when you hop on our Facebook page or a message board or these live chats or our tweet chats, you can share, I've checked these 4 places where I thought I could find this information. Where else could I look? And the community always has more information. I certainly don't know everything. I love when I can reach out to my genealogy colleagues and say, you know what, this is what I'm looking for, and I've checked these 4 places. Where else can I find this? And inevitably, they'll come up with some suggestion of some record set or some archive I can contact that I had never before considered. So once you've created your list, maybe you can reach out to others and see what else they know of. There are more records in the world than you can possibly imagine, and no one person is going to know all of those. Okay. So here is how this works in a real life situation, just so you kind of get an idea of how I walk through this myself. So the question is, or the specific goal is, who are the parents of Albert Jefferson Kerr? Now remember the process. The process is, what do you know and how do you know it? So a couple of things that you can do in this process. There's a big secret that professional genealogists keep, and that is that we do a lot of writing. I shared with you a few days ago how I keep my research notes. I don't care how you keep your research notes. The important thing is just to do it. So have you kept those research notes? The first step is to review them. And if you haven't kept research notes, or even if you have after you've reviewed them, maybe write out what you know in narrative format. One of the things I've discovered is, as people send in emails to me, a lot of times just the process of writing it out, all of a sudden at the end of the email, they'll say, hey, I wonder if I could check this and this and this. Or I just realized this. That process of writing it out sometimes helps you sort through your own thoughts and realize that maybe you've had the answer all along. So let's look, for example, at my great-grandfather, Albert Jefferson Kerr. So here's Albert Jefferson Kerr. He and his wife and their 12 children. I actually knew my great-grandmother. I have a picture of us together when I was young. And I don't remember her, I just knew her. And here are the notes that I have for him. So you can see that I've collected the 1910, 1920, and 1930 censuses. I haven't gone looking for him in the 1940 census yet. I still need to do that. And so maybe that's one of the questions that I ask, right? Find this, and then I can just highlight that so that I know I need to do that. I have a World War II draft card for him. He was part of the old man's draft, and I've transcribed that information. And then I have his baptismal information from my granny's Bible. And then I have a note here from my mother about when he died. She was 17 when he died, and 16, and so she remembers that. And she remembers the funeral service and all of that information. And so here's what I know about him. Okay, and if I look through these notes, I can see little clues about his parents. So for example, in the 1910 census, it says his parents were both born in Missouri. In the 1920 census, it says Illinois and Missouri. And in the 1930 census, it says Illinois and Missouri. Okay, now here's one of the challenges of family history, and I'll just kind of touch on this briefly, but just because something shows up more often doesn't make it more true. I hope I said that the right way, right? So this census says his parents were both born in Missouri. This could be right, even though 2 other censuses list his father's birthplace as Illinois. So it's not more makes more right, but all of those pieces of information can give you clues to what you're looking for. Consistently, Albert's birthplace is listed as Missouri. And as a matter of fact, in this 1942 draft card, it gives a specific birth date, the 15th of July, 1886, in Bland, Missouri. Okay, so I might need to go figure out where Bland, Missouri is. That might be one of the things that I need to do. So after reviewing this information, now I can take the next step, which is, what do I want to know and where can I find it? So what I want to know is, who are the parents of Albert Jefferson Kerr? And so where can I find that information? And so I'm just going to start a list. I'm going to look for a death certificate and or an obituary. He died in 1967, so both of those things. An obituary, almost certainly I should be able to find. Maybe not online. I might have to contact the local library where he died and see if they have old newspapers on microfilm and if anybody would be willing to look that up for me. Or I might have to put that on a list to do when I go on a research trip. A death certificate, I would probably have to look into the laws of the state of Arkansas where he died and see if they're public or not. Some states restrict access to birth, marriage, and death records, vital records, and so I'd have to look and see if they're available. Sometimes those restrictions are like 25 years or 50 years or 100 years that anybody has access. Sometimes those restrictions are, these are public information or private information for that long to anybody except immediate family. And so you can fill out, I'm his great-granddaughter, and you fill out the little form and then send it in, and you can purchase a copy of that death certificate from the State Vital Records Office or whoever happens to hold those records. So those are things that I could look into. I also could find him on the 1900 census. Now, if you remember here, I have him on the 1910 census, and that's the earliest record I show for him. That's the year he got married, according to the 1910 census, and he's living with his wife. So where was he in 1900? Maybe I could search for him and see if I can find him as a child with his parents. Maybe I could also look at the 1910 census and see if there are any other Kerrs living in that vicinity. If he just got married, it's possible that he has not moved away from his family yet. And so maybe search the 1910 census for other Kerr families to get some clues about who might be siblings or parents. And then, were there state censuses that were taken in Missouri? Now, you'll notice I didn't just put state census for Missouri as a checklist item. I don't know this off the top of my head. Were there state censuses in Missouri in 1885 or 1895? He was born in either 1885 or 1886, so he might not be on that 1885 census, but I know where he was born. And is there a Kerr family living in that place in 1885? It would have been just a few months before he was born. And so are there possible candidates for who his parents are? So this is the process that I go through. And then after I check each of these, now here's the warning, right? I actually found a copy of his obituary. Somebody on Find a Grave hadn't just taken a picture of his tombstone, they had actually scanned a copy of the newspaper clipping that listed his obituary. And so it's from the Arkansas Times on the 30th of January, 1967. And you'll see here it says he was born July 15th, 1885 in Cuba, Missouri, the son of James and Mary Kerr. So now I have names for his parents. But I'm not going to stop there. I'm still going to go and look for the 1900 census. I'm still going to look and see if there are state censuses in Missouri in 1885 or 1895. not just because I want to prove that this information is accurate, but also because it's part of the story of his life. Also, it will give me additional clues because we all know that in genealogy, one answer leads to a dozen more questions. Because looking at this information here, now I know the names of his parents, but what's my next specific research goal, right? Maybe I want to know what is Mary's maiden name. Maybe I want to know when and where was James born and when and where did he die. Maybe I want to know that same information for Mary. So one find in family history leads to the next list of questions. And if you want to keep track of those questions, you can do that. There are ways to do that in Family Tree Maker. We have the research log. I don't use that as heavily. I tend to use the notes field really heavily just because that works for me. You figure out what works for you. But you can create tasks where you just say, you know what, here's the next thing that I want to learn, right? I want to know, who are the parents, or, what's Mary's maiden name? What is Mary's maiden name? And I can write mother of Albert Jefferson Kerr. And then I can add a due date if I want. I can set priority on that. You can use those tasks in that fashion if that works for you. So lots of different ways you can approach this research plan. But remember, the two main questions, the first one to answer is, what do you know? And the next one is, what do you want to know? And if you can answer those even more specifically, what do you know and how do you know it, so that you can start to sort through fact and fiction and truth and error and all the things that kind of get mixed up sometimes in family history. And then be really specific about what you want to know and start to create a list of where you could find this information. And once you hit a roadblock with that, then reach out to the genealogy community and ask them if they know of other places or other sources where you could obtain that information, where you can find what it is that you're looking for. Because there's always more information. There are always more records. Not all of those records are online. As a matter of fact, a lot of them, especially the further back in time you go, a lot of them are going to be in local archives and libraries and places all over the world. And so coming up in a few weeks, we'll be talking about how to obtain records from remote archives where you don't have to go actually visit them, how to contact those archives. That is the brief overview of how to craft a research plan. I could probably do an hour-long presentation on this. If you have questions about this, please email them to me. Or if you're watching this live, you can stay online and I'll be on chat in just a few minutes and you can ask those questions there. Also, if you have other research questions and challenges, you can email those to us. I do read all of those emails, and that's how we craft these presentations, is based on the questions that you're asking. We put together presentations that we think will help you answer those questions for yourself. I've just finished putting together the July calendar. It should be posted on our events page, or the events tab on our Facebook page within the next couple of days, so you can see that full calendar for July and know what's coming up, and RSVP to join us for those presentations. Until next time, this is Krista Cowan. Have fun climbing your family tree.